They weren't soldiers by choice, but they fought like legends. Some of the most fearless warriors in history, and they weren't even part of an official army. What made them so fearless? Was it the land they fought on, or something deeper within them? Let's uncover the mystery behind the Boer War heroes. The Boer War was one of the most brutal and underestimated conflicts of the early 20th century. But when you dig deeper into the stories of the soldiers on both sides, it's not just strategy and weapons that stand out. It's the sheer courage of the people involved. These weren't just regular soldiers, they were farmers, civilians, and even teenagers, fighting a war that many thought they couldn't win. So what made these Boers fearless? What was it that turned average people into warriors who took on the British Empire and held their own for years? In this video, we're going to break down the mysteries of the Boer War and explore what made these fearless heroes so legendary. When most people think of the Boer War, they picture two mighty empires clashing. On one side, the British Empire, a massive and powerful colonial force. On the other, the Boers, farmers who didn't even have an official army, yet managed to stand their ground against one of the most advanced militaries in the world. But how did they do it? Was it just the land? Or was it something about the Boer people themselves? Something that made them willing to risk everything? That's the challenge we'll be uncovering today. To understand the fearless nature of the Boer fighters, we need to start by understanding who they were. The Boers weren't professional soldiers. In fact, most of them were farmers, living in a remote and rugged part of southern Africa. The term Boer actually comes from the Dutch word for farmer. These people weren't looking for war, they were simply trying to protect their land, their families, and their way of life. But life in South Africa wasn't easy. The Boers lived in a harsh environment, with dry, unforgiving landscapes and tough conditions that made survival an everyday challenge. They were used to hardship. It's no wonder they didn't back down when the British came marching in, demanding control over the land. The Brits, with their advanced technology, including machine guns and artillery, assumed it would be an easy fight. What they didn't account for was the grit and determination of the Boers. The Boer fighters used guerrilla tactics that would make even the best trained armies think twice. They knew the land like the back of their hand, and they used it to their advantage, launching hit-and-run attacks and ambushing British soldiers. They didn't have the heavy artillery or the organized units that the British had, but they had something much more powerful, intimate knowledge of their environment and a fierce will to survive. One of the key reasons the Boers were so fearless in battle was their deep connection to the land. For many of these farmers, it wasn't just about military tactics or even national pride, it was about defending their homes. They fought for their families, their land, and their way of life. For them, surrendering wasn't an option. One story that really highlights this is the Siege of Mafeking. British forces surrounded the small town of Mafeking, where a handful of Boer defenders managed to hold out for over 200 days. The defenders weren't even soldiers, but they were able to stand up to an empire for months on end. This incredible act of resistance against overwhelming odds demonstrates just how fearless these Boers were. It wasn't about military training, it was about heart. The Boer War wasn't just a men's battle. The women and children of the Boer republics played crucial roles too. As the war dragged on, and as the British forces pushed into Boer territory, the Boer women found themselves caught in the middle. But instead of running from the fight, many of them took on active roles in supporting the war effort. Women acted as spies, messengers, and even combatants when the need arose. Their courage was on par with the men, and their contributions were just as vital to the Boer success. One of the most iconic battles of the Boer War was the Battle of Spion Kop, and it perfectly encapsulates the fearless nature of the Boer fighters. The British, confident in their superior numbers and artillery, launched an assault on Spion Kop, a strategic hill that overlooked the area around Ladysmith. But what the British didn't anticipate was the tenacity and bravery of the Boer fighters holding that hill. The Boers, using the natural landscape to their advantage, set up positions that allowed them to launch highly effective surprise attacks. When the British advanced, they were met with unexpected resistance. The Boers didn't have the overwhelming firepower the British enjoyed, but they were able to make the most of the terrain, and their precision shooting had a devastating impact. The British forces were forced to retreat after suffering heavy losses. This battle is a great example of the Boer warriors' fierce commitment. They were fighting not only to protect their homes, but also to prove that they could stand up to one of the most powerful militaries in the world. The British loss at Spion Kop was a turning point, showing that the war was far from over, and the Boers were capable of holding their own against overwhelming odds. The bravery of the Boer soldiers during this battle showed something unique about their mindset. They didn't just fight because they had to, but because they believed in their cause. There was a palpable sense of unity among the Boers, one that many historians agree was a crucial factor in their success. The concept of commandos was another key factor that set the Boers apart from their British counterparts. Commandos were not professional armies. They were groups of fighters, often made up of farmers, who would band together to defend their land. They were incredibly flexible and used guerrilla tactics to great effect. These tactics weren't new, but the Boers perfected them, making them an almost impossible enemy to defeat in open battle. One key element of the commando system was the reliance on mobility and surprise. The Boers would strike quickly and then disappear into the landscape, using their knowledge of the terrain to stay one step ahead of the British. This type of warfare was especially effective in the vast, open spaces of South Africa. The Boers could make use of the hills, valleys, and even the harsh desert environment, giving them the upper hand against an army that was more used to conventional fighting. Unlike the British, who were trained in traditional battle strategies, the Boers used their environment to their advantage. They didn't just fight from trenches, they used the landscape itself as part of their strategy. Whether it was ambushing British patrols, setting up sniper positions in the mountains, or attacking supply lines, the Boer commandos were experts at making every terrain feature work for them. This guerrilla warfare not only frustrated the British military but also gave the Boers the advantage in terms of mobility. In contrast to the British, who had to fight in fixed positions, the Boer commandos could attack when and where it suited them, then melt away into the environment before the British could regroup. This unpredictability made the Boers one of the most difficult enemies the British had ever encountered. While the Boer fighters were ordinary men and women, there were several key leaders whose bravery and tactical brilliance played a critical role in the success of the Boer War. Let's take a look at a few of them. One of the most famous Boer generals during the war was Piet Cronje. Known for his tactical ingenuity, Cronje was the mastermind behind some of the most successful Boer engagements of the war. He was also known for his bravery and ability to inspire his men, making him one of the most respected figures in the conflict. Cronje's leadership shone brightest during the Siege of Mafeking and the Battle of Magersfontein, where his strategy and tenacity forced the British into difficult positions. His ability to adapt to changing circumstances on the battlefield made him a key player in the Boer resistance. What made Cronje stand out wasn't just his military acumen, it was his willingness to put everything on the line for his men and his cause. He wasn't just a commander from the rear, he fought alongside his soldiers, often at the front lines, earning their respect and loyalty. Another pivotal figure was General Koos de la Rey, often referred to as the Lion of the Western Transvaal. De la Rey's fearlessness and tactical genius made him a symbol of Boer resilience. He was known for his ability to lead troops through some of the toughest battles of the war, including the Battle of Modder River, where his forces managed to hold off a much larger British contingent. De la Rey's approach to warfare was methodical and patient. While many generals focused on quick, decisive strikes, de la Rey understood the value of long-term resistance. He played a critical role in the war of attrition that wore down British forces over time. His reputation grew to the point where he was often seen as a symbol of hope for the Boer cause. He also had an uncanny ability to rally his troops, even when the war was at its darkest. His deep connection to the Boer people and his commitment to their survival made him one of the war's most beloved and respected leaders. Louis Botha was another key Boer leader who stood out during the war. Initially, Botha wasn't considered one of the most experienced military minds, but as the war continued, his tactical brilliance and leadership skills emerged. He took over as the commander-in-chief of the Boer forces and led them in several successful engagements. Botha's leadership was particularly important after the war moved into its final stages. He understood the value of diplomacy and played a crucial role in negotiating with the British in the post-war period. His leadership in battle, as well as his efforts to bring about peace, solidified his place as one of the most significant figures in South African history. By the end of the Boer War, it was clear that while the Boers didn't win a traditional military victory, they had achieved something equally important. They had earned respect on a global scale. Despite being outmatched in terms of resources, technology, and sheer manpower, they fought with an intensity that stunned the British Empire. Though the British ultimately emerged victorious, The Boers proved that they could not be easily conquered. The war marked a shift in the way wars were fought, particularly with the use of guerrilla tactics and the growing role of civilians in conflict. The war ended with the Treaty of Vereeniging in 1902, which saw the Boer republics officially become part of the British Empire. But the Boers were granted significant autonomy. More importantly, they earned the respect of the British, who recognized their courage and resilience. The key turning point in the Boer War came with the British strategy of internment camps. As the British forces found themselves struggling against the Boers' guerrilla tactics, they turned to a strategy designed to break the Boer will to fight. They created concentration camps to hold civilians, hoping to drain the Boers of their strength and resources. But instead of breaking their spirit, this move only hardened the resolve of the Boers. The suffering in these camps was unimaginable. Thousands of Boer women and children died from disease, malnutrition, and mistreatment. Yet instead of surrendering, the Boers only became more determined. The death of their loved ones fueled their fight, and they became even more relentless in their attacks. It's a key moment that shows just how much the Boer fighters were willing to endure. They weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for their people, their families, and their very existence. In the end, the Boer War was a war of endurance, spirit, and sheer determination. The British Empire, with all its resources and technological advantages, couldn't break the will of the Boers. What made these fighters so fearless? It wasn't just the land they fought on, it was their unbreakable spirit, their deep love for their homes, and their refusal to give in, no matter the odds. The mystery behind the Boer War heroes lies in their ability to fight not just with weapons, but with everything they had in their hearts. They weren't professional soldiers, they were farmers, families, and communities standing up for what they believed in. Their bravery has inspired generations, and it serves as a reminder that sometimes, the greatest power lies in the will to survive. What made the Boer War heroes so fearless was not just their tactical skill or their resourcefulness, it was their unyielding spirit. These were people who fought for something they believed in, whether it was their land, their homes, or their families. And that belief gave them an incredible strength to keep going when others would have given up. The Boer War was not just a fight for territory, it was a fight for identity, survival, and dignity. The Boers may not have defeated the British in the traditional sense, but they forever changed the landscape of military history with their bravery, their resourcefulness, and their unshakable will to stand tall. Want to uncover more untold stories from history? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more amazing insights.